Katie Vidmar is a body literacy and fertility awareness educator and a passionate advocate for bringing holistic women's health to underserved and under-resourced populations. She is the creator of Elevate, a training program for healthcare professionals designed to address health disparities through shallow entry approaches to body literacy, cycle tracking, fertility awareness, and creating avenues towards root cause healing for menstrual health problems in community health settings. She is the founder of the Body Literacy Project, which aims to ensure that every young man and woman in our country receives the knowledge of their bodies that is their birthright, and the creator of the video series Reframing Women's Health and CycleWise. She writes and speaks nationally, advocating for body literacy education and cycle-informed reproductive health care for women. She lives in Bismarck, North Dakota with her husband and her children. Please join me in welcoming Katie Vidmar to the NFP Podcast.
Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, everyone.
Tonight, Emily and I are really excited. We're joined by Katie Vidmar. She's a body literacy and fertility awareness educator, and she's going to be sharing with us a plethora of great work that she's doing with kind of boots on the ground, educating women, providing great resources to pregnancy centers and to the general public about how we can help better educate the female population and even some of the male population about the gift and beauty that is our bodies and our reproductive systems and our cycles and how all they work together in unison with the complementarity of man and woman, and then just independently for greater health for women in particular. So welcome so much to the podcast. Thank you for being here, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, both of you.
Yes, we're very excited. So, all right, Katie, before we started recording, you were just sharing like all this amazing stuff you're doing. So let's start with like the first topic. Well, before we even do that, why don't you just introduce yourself? Because we can read a bio. But let's just hear a little bit about your background. How did you get into this world of fertility awareness? You know, everyone has kind of their own journey as to how they get here. And so what was yours?
Oh, it's a great question. Well, I was blessed to be raised by a woman who tracked her cycle. So that counts for a lot. I grew up, my parents learned a symptothermal method when I was a toddler. And my mom took her chart back to her charting instructor and said, "What does it mean when your temperature doesn't drop?" And it was my sister Molly coming along. So in some ways, I just count myself as so fortunate and so blessed to have been exposed to this understanding of the body and what it means to live your life in such a way that you're working with your body's natural design from the word go. I carried that into college with me. I was a pre-med major. I was an RA. I recruited a med student to come to my floor and teach everyone the 4 phases of the cycle. And I got in a little bit of trouble because I engaged some defense mechanisms of some of the women on my floor who had struggles and thought that I was trying to throw shade on hormonal contraception. So I had a couple meetings with my hall director. So learned very quickly just how politically fraught these topics can be, and then just how sensitive and personal they are for women as well. And just became really passionate about holding space to have those conversations where women really feel safe to come and ask questions and to admit that they don't know what they don't know. And Yeah, I ended up getting a master's in biotechnology and ethics, which allowed me to think really like all the way down to the ground of things about some of these topics and really get clear on why I believed what I believed and to really understand the culture that I'm speaking into as well, which was always a goal and a passion of mine. When I was a newlywed, my husband and I did a Billings course, and I ended up becoming a Billings method instructor myself. And not long after that, I was asked to step in as an executive director at a local pregnancy center, so a nonprofit community health clinic, focused on serving women facing unplanned pregnancy. And in my interview, the board was really forward thinking, and they said, we don't want to just be there for women in a moment of crisis. We want to show up for women in our communities full stop, whether those women happen to be facing an unplanned pregnancy or not. And we know there's a huge connection between women not understanding their bodies and unplanned pregnancy. And you have this Billings fertility awareness instructor credential. Can you figure out how to do that in a public health setting? And like a fool, I said, sure, we can do that. And I quickly realized that the couples that I was seeing coming through my church for pre-marriage were radically different than the women and men that were walking into the pregnancy center, and that we needed a translation, right? We needed really sharp, agile tools that distill this vast knowledge that we have down to what's simple, essential, and easily shared. Easy for my staff to learn and communicate, and easy for our patients to receive. So in some ways, that's been the task of the last decade of my life, to figure out, how do we bring this knowledge to everyone? All people, all men and women deserve to understand their bodies in this way. And when we don't have this understanding of how our bodies work in a state of health, we're really vulnerable. We're really at quite a disadvantage. I think you can make an argument that you can't have informed consent over your healthcare decisions unless you first understand how your body works in a state of health. And I think that's especially true for women's health. So I've continued to work with the pregnancy center world. I've started dipping my toe into federally qualified settings, even Title X clinics, partnering with these people to help them bring fertility awareness to under-resourced, underserved populations, to meet some of the root causes of infertility upstream so that we can really help people optimize their health that way. And then even further upstream, just launched a website last month, the Body Literacy Project, where we're working on bringing knowledge of the body to students in America, so that, yeah, we can head into life knowing the truth of our bodies and allow that knowledge to form the decisions that we make. So there's the high level 5-minute. Here I am.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you're doing amazing work. Thank you for everything you're doing. My gosh. And meanwhile, you're pregnant with your 7th child. So it is just a testament to what God will do with your yes when you say yes to him, Katie. So that's just really beautiful. Thank you. So let's first, I guess, talk a little bit about the work with the pregnancy centers. So interesting. My little bit of work, like very, very small stint in like working at all with a pregnancy center director. It is very interesting that I feel like a lot of maybe correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of them are Protestant started. There are obviously Catholic, people who are Catholic who start pregnancy centers too, but I've met a lot of more Protestants who are involved in the pregnancy crisis center world. And they do seem a little off-put by the idea of like, let's teach people about their cycle and about fertility awareness, about ovulation. Because won't this just empower them to now have, casual intercourse, but, target their use of, barrier methods and try to avoid that way or whatever, which I remember when I first heard that, it did kind of feel a little like, wait, so you're not telling them to try to manipulate their behavior? Like you're not telling them about their body? It just seemed like really wrong seemed like really wrong to me, but I was like, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. I think you have very good intentions in what you're saying. But I don't think that that's right, right? Which like everyone, which we talked about a little bit ago, like everyone deserves to know about their body and know this information. And so that switch, I guess, from, or not switch, but the juxtaposition you experienced of comparing, your marriage prep folks and people you worked with at the parish to individuals who walked into a crisis pregnancy center. What were some of the biggest, I guess, hurdles or differences in those demographics that you had to first address as you were kind of building this curriculum model for pregnancy centers to bring this information to their clients?
Well, that's a great question. I'll answer that one first, and then maybe I can circle back to some of the dynamics that you were kind of pointing to within the pregnancy help movement itself, right? I think the biggest practical barriers were kind of what I pointed to, that we do have this vast body of knowledge. And I think we've worked so hard to prove that natural family planning is evidence based and rooted in science. And that a lot of the different methods, especially whether we're talking about the instructor level or a medical management level, it is very rigorous education to become certified. And then the tools that you're given to teach women and couples is likewise very rigorous. When we switch into public health world, it's considered best practice for health education to be delivered at a 5th to 8th grade reading level. And often, if you're given an intro session for a particular method, because we've bent over backwards to be very robust and scientific, we inadvertently have created barriers to entry. So I think just defining terms, using simple, essential language, I like to say that we're not watering things down, we're distilling them down. And somebody needed to do that. And I'm not saying I have it completely worked out, but I've taken a stab at it. and I don't know a lot of other resources out there that have tried to bring this down to a level that's easily shared in that way. Another thing is just time. I would get a young woman really interested in learning about her body and tracking her cycle for health. And she would come for our intro session, and we were trained in a particular method, and it was an hour and a half. And she would feel kind of overwhelmed and flooded, and she would ghost us after that. And if she had wanted to use this as a method for pregnancy prevention, I feel like we had done her a disservice, because she knew more than she did when she walked in the door, but she hadn't yet become fully taught when it comes to the rules for achieving and avoiding pregnancy. And this, I feel like, is what in the public health space gives fertility awareness a bad rap, right? It's like, well, it didn't work. Like, well, she didn't know what she didn't know still, and behaved accordingly. So finding ways to teach people thoroughly in a shorter amount of time. So really coming up with a tiered approach where we start with basic education that's non-method specific. And then there are fertility awareness methods that were designed for the third world. They were designed to be learned and taught by anyone quickly and easily. And yes, they have lower typical and perfect use effectiveness rates. So we do lose some effectiveness at pregnancy prevention. But what we gain is access. And what we gain is people working with their bodies. What we gain are women who are using their voice and their relationship to establish periodic abstinence, right? There's so many things that we gain by
Well,
embracing
and
these simplified methods.
sorry, Katie. Yeah, I
No,
was
you're
just
good.
going to say, and then also, we're just preserving the dignity of the woman's body
Of
and the
course.
dignity of the
Yes.
man's body by
Yes.
having them work with this cooperative natural process of their cycles, or of the fertility cycle, ovulation cycle, however you want to define it. I also think that that's, at least I find it insulting when you hear people who, like, I want to say again, well-intentioned, to be as charitable as possible, but that will say, well, why are we teaching them this? This is too hard for them. They can't understand it. And them being maybe
Right.
a lower, socioeconomic
Yeah.
class or however you want to define them. Okay.
Right.
Someone who's not you, I guess, and the standard at which you're holding up people who should be reproducing. I don't know. It's just all so very, very discriminating in my opinion. But anyway, that we should not do that to them, that it's too much for them. And we should just basically castrate them because that would just be so much easier. They wouldn't have to think about it. And then,
Yeah.
of course, we wouldn't have to be, like the fine print at the very bottom. Like, we don't have to be, or the thought bubble that's not said, like, we don't have to be accountable or responsible should they
Sure.
find themselves pregnant because they're just too stupid to avoid a pregnancy without us just shutting
Yeah.
down their system altogether. So, anyway,
Yeah.
again, trying to be more charitable about that, but I feel like in a
No,
way
it's
it's
a
like
real
an
opinion
easy
out
way
there.
out.
There's a book by Jennifer Block called Everything Below the Waist that came out in 2019. And in her first chapter called The Church of the Magic Bullet, which is all about contraception, she addresses this head on. And I think she does a really good job. She quotes a nurse, a certified nurse midwife, who's working at a low income clinic in inner city Chicago. And this nurse says, of course, there's better things than hormonal contraception. There's tracking your cycle, there's healthy relationships. But I can't undo centuries of oppression in a 15-minute appointment. But the best I can do is give her something so that she won't come back pregnant in 6 weeks. And then in the end, she acknowledges that this is not actual empowerment, it's just harm reduction.
Mm.
So I appreciate this quote a lot because I think we have to address, like, in order to be able to use fertility awareness effectively, you have to have sexual agency, or what the social scientists will call reproductive health self-efficacy, right? Do you use your voice in healthcare, and do you use your voice in intimate relationships? And so often people that are working with under-resourced populations feel that they're working with women who don't have this, right? They don't have the self-confidence to do that. What's really interesting is that when we learn our bodies and we start to track our cycles, guess what happens to our measurable reproductive health self-efficacy scores?
Mm.
They rise.
Mm.
There's some really great research being done right now by Dr. Sarah Hill. And she is a scientific advisor for the Flow Health app, as well as 28andMe, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's correct. And she's working to demonstrate this on a larger scale. And I think it makes sense, right? If I'm a diabetic and I have a continuous glucose monitor in place, and I'm aware in real time of the story my body is telling me about how, you know, what's going on with my metabolism and my insulin, we can see how this really does motivate behavior change to have that connection with your biomarkers. And I think that the same is true with cycle tracking. And that if we withhold this information, if we say, you know what, you can't handle this knowledge of your bodies, we know better, and so you don't even get to know, then we're making that decision for women about whether they want to be empowered or not. And my challenge to people serving in under-resourced settings is, friends, it's not your choice. It's her choice. And she may still choose hormonal contraception, but at least she's doing that in the context of informed consent. And you're depriving her of that if you don't even present this as an option.
Right. And I guess hearing you say that, I just felt very proud as a Catholic to know, like, and that's what the Catholic Church would teach is that everyone is entitled to this information. We would never say, oh, you're too stupid, you're under-resourced, you don't have this background, you don't have this cultural environment to live this out. So we just are not going to, it's just the information is just not appropriate to you. We are making that decision for you.
Yeah.
It's just very degrading. And so
No,
I love that
true.
about our faith, I have to
Yeah.
say. And
Yeah. I
oh,
think if
good.
we're like overly scrupulous, you can, oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, um, on the one hand, we can see how keeping women in the dark about their bodies is to the advantage of those who want to promote medical interventions that are going to suppress and circumvent our bodies, right? If we don't know that's what's actually happening, we're more willing to comply. And
Right,
this is, I think, the story of modern women's healthcare.
right,
But I
right.
think on the other side, right, if we're overly scrupulous, if we are maybe have a a wrong understanding of human freedom and a wrong understanding of what like really makes me complicit with someone else's decision, we might, out of a good intention to want to prevent, we don't want to lead someone else into sin, we might end up inadvertently following the same logic. Right? We might also end up withholding information. Um, and then the logic is the same. You can't
Right,
handle the truth about your body.
right,
We know better, and you don't get to know.
right. Yep. I wanted
Yeah. So
just
I
to,
think
go ahead. Maybe a delay.
no, we're good.
I was going to say, I wanted to just circle back a little bit to something you'd alluded to when you were sharing kind of your story to where you are now about, working with college girls and bringing in speakers and kind of the defensiveness that can be brought about
Yeah.
when you share new information with somebody. I feel like I just experienced this today, in fact, because someone was sharing how their medical professional was kind of validating their painful periods, like an irregular, unhealthy menstrual bleeding pattern that they've had like for a long time. Um, and I just shared like I'm not a doctor, but in all of my work with my knowledge, based on my knowledge, that might be your typical pattern. That's not a optimal healthy typical pattern. And I could sense a little bit of like curiosity at the same time defensiveness of like, wait, like my doctor didn't like who, kind of like, which is what I kind of led with, right? Like, I'm not the medical professional. I recognize this, but it's like, well, how dare you say my doctor didn't tell me something right or isn't really helping me or is saying that this is
Yeah.
fine. Um, and so anyway, I just think that I don't think cognitive dissonance, it's not a correct term. It's something else in our human nature because I've experienced it myself and I've experienced it in these settings in other conversations as well when we kind of draw attention to, well, maybe the way that we've thought about something or our approach to something, right? Like, oh, and we see this in women when they share birth stories and they have different birth
Mm,
experiences, right? Like, well, I
right.
had to get this, whatever intervention is. It's like, really? We had to get this intervention? Or like, and then
Right.
someone maybe shares, like, there might have been a possibility for something else. And it's like, well, no, like just this sense of great discomfort. And I don't know if it's like a discomfort at like, wait, well, was I lied to and I bought into the lie? So what does that say about me? I don't know if that
Sure.
makes sense, ladies, if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I have definitely experienced that in this world of, teaching women to chart about these intimate issues about your body and about your healthcare and
Right.
about the options you've been provided with in order to make an informed consent. And I think when you realized you haven't been provided those options for whatever reason that may be, oftentimes I really think it's just out of ignorance of whoever's talking to you, might just not know the other options. I think that is the majority of the case. But yeah,
Right.
how we can react as the receiver of that information. Um, anyway, I just wanted to
Absolutely.
kind of, yeah,
I
bring that up
think
a little bit.
I think it affects us because it's personal, right? Like
Right.
our cycle makes us a woman. And
Mm,
so it's like if you're saying anything about my cycle that doesn't feel validated with my doctor, it's like almost I remember I can give an example. I remember just when I was learning how to chart my cycle. And just the off the cuff comment from my teacher just saying, well, clearly there's something wrong here. That
Mm.
just to this day, I'll never forget that. It just hit, and it's because it's personal, I think. Like this is who we are. And so if someone says something that feels a little um I don't even know, almost like an attack, I guess, is how it
Yeah,
Right.
can
feel
feel.
judged.
And I really just think it's
Judged,
because
right.
it's judged. Because
Yeah,
it's who it makes us a woman. Like it's who we are,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my dear friends, Megan Droppa, would use the word defense mechanisms to
Right.
describe what we're talking about, right? Um, that even if we ourselves are questioning whether we made the right decision, if someone else questions that, I am going to dig in and build a fortress to defend why I did what I did. And and maybe even especially if I'm feeling insecure about the decision I made.
Mm-hmm.
And shame is the thing that really drives that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we cannot underestimate the power that shame has over us, especially in our culture. Shame about our bodies, shame about our fertility, shame about our femininity, all those things. And I think when we start now talking about sexuality, then uh, we really we really encounter it. And I think that this is the beauty of body literacy as an approach because we can give women full knowledge of who they are. They can begin to see that they were made in a way that's ordered and beautiful and makes sense. And we're not making value judgments about their medical decisions. We're not making value judgments about who they've had sex with and when, right? Um, we're just coming alongside them really gently in a disarming way and saying, "You deserve to know this." And then she sees it all on her own over time, and I never had to point it out to her.
Right. It is amazing. I think that the power of that is just it's worth its weight in gold. It's quite fascinating to see how that evolves. And so
Yeah,
this is something that we have. I will link to your website in the show notes, but this is the Elevate curriculum that you're talking about, right? For the pregnancy centers. Okay.
that's right.
And so do you offer trainings for people who want to implement this curriculum?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Because I am a busy mom, it's a pre-recorded on-demand
Oh, that's
training.
great.
And I had it medically reviewed by Facts about
Mhm.
fertility. So Dr. Marguerite Duane's organization
Mm.
was really important to me that this was the highest quality, even in being a simplified approach. I just think, depending on what state you're in, pregnancy centers are under a lot of scrutiny
Mhm.
and they need to be able to prove it. They have to
Right.
go to the mat and win. And
Right.
so, yeah, so there's kind of there's two components, right? There's the educational component, and then every one of the modules pairs with a skill for a nurse or an educator. So there's a body literacy 101 module that pairs with the body literacy flip chart,
Oh, cool.
which is taking that intro session and distilling it down into 6 minutes
Wow,
so
that's
that
great.
you can drop that in to a negative pregnancy test appointment, drop it into an STI appointment if your clinic offers that. So a real skills focus. So at the end, we're hoping that nurses and educators are able to teach the basics, get women started tracking their cycles for health, triage those charts, and not diagnosing anything. We're just saying, I see what I'm expecting to see. Or, it looks like your body's asking for more support and you have options. And if you see yourself wanting to have children in the future and you really want to get at the root cause of this and protect your health span and your lifespan, you might want to think about pursuing a root cause treatment plan. And let's just build a pipeline to people that are trained to help women heal and
There's
really see the fifth vital sign in the cycle chart.
Wouldn't this be amazing? I'm just thinking about one of my areas of interest is college health centers. And
Yes.
oh my gosh, wouldn't this be so cool if this was the
Yes.
counseling they were given if they went in for like an STI appointment or a
Yeah.
pregnancy test appointment? Oh my
That's
gosh,
right.
that'd be
And
so
that's the
amazing.
thing. Right now, it's framed for a faith-based pregnancy center,
Mm,
but the medical education works anywhere. So,
right.
um, yeah, I'm working. It's not spun up yet, but I'm working on like the version for Title 10, right? That has
Oh, cool.
that like secular frame because they have different concerns coming from
Right.
that community, and they need to be addressed. And yeah, so I grabbed the URL for cycle informed care.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome,
over
Katie.
time, after baby, working up towards that.
That's so
Yeah.
fantastic. That's so fantastic. Gosh, good luck with that. That's so amazing.
Thank you.
Well, I'll link to, yeah, so we're going to pivot our conversation to a different area that Katie is working in now, but that Elevate curriculum, the work with the pregnancy centers for those that are interested in learning more or that are currently at a pregnancy center, just find any of this conversation interesting or volunteer at one, want to get involved in this, you guys can reach out to Katie or just kind of learn more about this information on that website. So check out the show notes for that. And then Katie, let's talk a little bit. I think this kind of goes along with, well, it does, not kind of, it definitely goes along with body literacy. We'll end with kind of the body literacy project, your newest work. But let's just switch a little bit to this conversation about an area that you're interested in, like to talk about, which is female pleasure during the sexual act, during the marital act.
Yeah.
Because that's something that, Emily and I really love to highlight, and we've talked about on this podcast multiple times kind of it takes your breath away when you read things like Theology of the Body and you learn that men in their often stronger desire for the sexual union compared to women are called in that act to wait for the woman and to achieve that high moment of pleasure together because that isn't like the highest union that we can have this side of heaven to reflect our creator who is ecstasy, who is love, who is just pure love. Um, and so I knew that's just it's just really important. And I think for most women who don't understand the church's teaching on human sexuality and the role of men and women, and because I'm sure you can relate to this, Katie, maybe not, but I imagine you can, experiencing conversations with women, both Catholic and non-Catholic Protestants, who have maybe heard of a different narrative about female experience during the sexual act and the role of women in that act, and that perhaps it's all about the man and the man's desire and the man's needs, and we're just there for them, pretty much, which is not church's teaching, nor the vision of um, how God designed that act. So, yeah. So just, I don't know, wherever you want to take us from
Sure.
there.
Yeah. Well, I do still continue to teach NFP for our diocese, and I find that leading with the body really helps to build the foundation on the natural level to help the church's teaching on the order of grace make a lot more sense. And again, it's disarming, right? If people come in with a preconception about the church's teaching that it's just a list of no's when it comes to our sexuality, this kind of blows their minds. Um, I mean, I lead by saying, good, honest science will always confirm what we know to be true as revealed by faith. So we're going to start with uh, some science about the female body, and then we're going to uh, lead into a truth that we hold because of who Jesus Christ has revealed the human person to be and marriage to be and all that, right? So usually it makes them uncomfortable, but I just tell them we're going to talk about female sexual pleasure and the physiology of that. In order for women to become fully aroused, it takes 35 to 45 minutes, right, of being carefully tended to by their spouse. Whereas, men can be fully aroused in, 60 seconds flat. It doesn't take much time. Women have just as much erectile tissue as men do. That's a fun fact. It's just that ours is internal to our body. Male genitalia is external to the body. It doesn't really play much of a supporting role, a supportive role structurally, anatomically. The word testicle comes from the same Latin root as the word testify. It means little witnesses, like they're standing witness to his masculinity outside of his body. Women, on the other hand, are our organs that experience sexual pleasure are also doing a job all day long. You think about a woman's internal pelvic tissues. So it's really to her benefit in the long run. It's like very restorative of her body, helps any number of things, preventing pelvic organ prolapse, helping a woman restore postpartum. All these things, we're drawing lymphatic flow and blood flow when she's tended to in this way, right? Okay, so when a woman finally reaches climax, if you think about the shape of the uterus, the womb, it's kind of shaped like a light bulb, right? And the cervix is at the bottom. And when she has a cervical orgasm, her whole womb starts to pulse in a way that feels very good to the woman. That it's like the peak of her like emotional connection. We're a unity of body and soul. So she's feeling like the most bonded at that moment. And when the uterus pulses, if you think about what happens when it, if you, I mean, I don't think you'll show them, but if you hold your hands together and your thumbs represent the cervix, and then if the womb is going to contract slightly, at the same moment, the cervix dilates slightly, which creates a larger opening for sperm to enter and optimizes chances of conception. So even if the magic doesn't happen and a couple doesn't climax at the same time, like John Paul II talks about in Love and Responsibility, I think it's nearly physiologically impossible. Respectfully, John Paul, maybe there's women out there who will post comments and prove me wrong. But there's an argument to be made even after the man has climaxed to still continue to bring the woman forward through that process, because it's going to optimize your chances of conceiving, right? If that's your desired end. So what does all that mean, right? It means that physiologically, bonding and babies are one thing in the body. And if you disrupt the woman's hormonal blueprint through hormonal contraception, if she has an IUD in place that immobilizes her cervix, if you do something that's going to prevent conception, you also do great harm to her ability to experience pleasure during the sexual act as well. So physiologically, when you lose one, you lose both. And this then becomes a jumping off point for explaining the church's teaching on why the unitive and the procreative elements of the marital union are one, and that when you lose one, you lose both.
Katie, maybe you can talk to, just to play kind of devil's advocate here, for the person who says, okay, well, let's leave the woman intact and he'll just get a vasectomy, or we'll just use a condom. So her cervix and, her uterus and everything can still contract when she climaxes, and she can have all those great experiences. And and the man will still, be able to be aroused and climax too. We'll just make sure that, sperm don't get to where they need to be. How does that, how does that, the man's part play into this conversation?
That's a great question. I think it would be similar, right? I've heard plenty of comments about, men don't appreciate the male condom. That they definitely see it as something that is to be tolerated. It's not something anyone I know really looks forward to. So I would say that the element is still true, right? That like he also deserves to have an experience that that is unhindered and And as vasectomy goes, I feel like that one's a little bit trickier because it's more hidden. I would need to think it through. Um, and I think to do that, I would probably return to the work of uh, Father Walter Ong. He's a Jesuit who has thought a lot about the masculine genius, if we can call it that. You know, John Paul II spent so much time unpacking the feminine genius, and Walter Ong helps us think about masculinity through a similar lens. What does the symbolic reality of man reveal? Um, right? But if a man has had a vasectomy, then there's a certain power and potency that is properly his that he's abdicated, and that plays out. I would have to do more learning myself to understand how it plays out physiologically, but I can tell you that many couple of friends that we have that have chosen vasectomy are suffering something that they don't even know what they're suffering. And and it's painful to watch them. But they've cut a vital source that brings life to their relationship. And I'm from North Dakota, so when I was in pre-marriage, there was a lot of agricultural analogies. And the deacon giving the NFP talk at our pre-Cana said something like, "What happens to a steer, fellas? He gets fat and lazy. No woman wants to go to bed with the steer." And it's crass, and there's something that's true about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yes, it's kind of a funny anecdote, but there's nothing funny about it. These people are suffering something. So
And there's no
that's
man.
my
I have
best
yet to.
answer.
Sorry, yeah, no, it's just interesting. I mean, wasn't trying to put you on the spot. It was more like a thought game, like, how does
Yeah,
this
I
kind of
like.
play into it? Yeah, I'd like to reach out to Father Walter Ung. I haven't heard of him. This idea of the masculine genius. That
Yeah,
sounds really interesting. But I think, at least when I've heard of men talk about vasectomies, I've heard men be excited, quote unquote, about a vasectomy and that they're looking forward to not having any more children if they really don't want to have any more children. But I haven't
sure.
ever heard of a man who said, like, oh, this is a really dignifying, exciting thing. It's more like
Yeah,
a necessary evil, if you will.
yeah,
And they recognize secular men. I mean, that has like nothing to do with faith. It's just like this real off put of like, man, that's my, that's my manhood. Like, what are we doing here?
yeah,
But I think just the reality of the responsibility of having more children is such a motivating
yeah,
factor or demotivating factor in some of those cases where they're like,
definitely.
I would be willing to do that in order to not
Yeah, or they've
have
seen
more
their
baby.
wife really suffer through
For
pregnancy,
sure. Yeah.
and maybe it's life-threatening for her to conceive
Right.
again, right?
Right.
And they
Yeah.
like really see it as an act of self-sacrifice
For sure.
and care for her, right? So
Yep.
there's certainly experiences where we can have a lot of mercy on the decision.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of justification of the decision, and some of those could be, very well intentioned, well meaning. It's not always just, yeah, just don't want to have another baby. So, um, okay. Thank you for touching on that, Katie. I think that's really beautiful and important to highlight. Um, so let's maybe transition into, unless there's another project or thing you'd love to talk about, kind of our third focus, which is this body literacy project that you're working on. Why don't you share with us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So a lot of the pregnancy centers I partner with have a relationship with schools, both private and public. And many of them use sexual risk avoidance curricula. So, in contrast to comprehensive sex ed, which is more focused on avoiding unplanned pregnancy through contraception, sexual risk avoidance takes a primary prevention position where we're helping people think long term about their goals, think about relationships in context, and think about sex in context of relationships, right? And then proposing that abstinence is the form of primary prevention for unplanned pregnancy. But the thing is, whether we're talking about comprehensive sex ed or sexual risk avoidance, the focus of both is avoiding an unplanned pregnancy. And when we look at infertility rates in our country, there are many women who feel that sex ed didn't do enough to really prepare them. Yes, thank you for teaching me to avoid unplanned pregnancy, but what about how to achieve pregnancy when the time is right? and what do I need to know in my teens and my early 20s so that I can make decisions now to protect my future health and my future fertility? So in part, that's where the Body Literacy Project is coming from. And it's just this little seed of a thing. It's a website that you can find online now. It's a work in progress. So have mercy on the prego mama who took a chance and put up a new website. But really equipping policymakers to enact body literacy education standards. And then also promoting different curricula, my curriculum as well as other people's, that can be brought into school settings, both private and public. And again, this is not properly puberty education, which is like more about the coming changes and hygiene, right? And it's not sex education. It's how does your mature body work in a state of health, and how is your hormonal health related to your overall health, both for young men and for young women. Interestingly, the first menstrual health education standards in the country came out of Washington, D.C. in March of 2023. And when you dig into it a little bit more, they're actually excellent standards. They're for the 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade. And it's things like know the 4 phases of the cycle, know that your white flow is a sign of health, know that ovulation is the main event, be able to name the risks, benefits, and environmental impact of ovarian suppression products. And they're talking about the pill. So, and there isn't any standards related to young men. They were just confined to menstrual health education, but great start. And the physician who was the subject matter expert for the DC Department of Education that helped define these standards, when she was interviewed, she said, you know what? We don't live in a country where we can count on abortion excess anymore because of the Dobbs decision. And we know there's a connection between women facing an unplanned pregnancy and not understanding their bodies. And we don't know where DC students are going to land in this country. And so it's time that we roll up our sleeves and start teaching every student how her body works. I'm like, lady, I agree with you. We work together. So
God uses everything, right? Like of all the twisted ways to get there, like that's amazing. Amazing.
yeah. So in this moment when it seems so contentious, especially around women's health and infertility, and how do we address these deep questions that cut to the heart, as we were talking about earlier, there is consensus around body literacy. Massachusetts is the second state to they've pulled a lot of what DC did. They're also funding menstrual health products in public schools to address period poverty, and just reduce stigma. And I just note that both of these states are quite blue, and they are pairing this with more of a comprehensive sex ed approach, which is going to be encouraging sexual risk behaviors. They both deploy desexed language, using the term menstruators rather than women. And there's an article we can link in the show notes that explains why maybe that's why we should rethink that. just from a secular perspective, that if we're working with people that have low health literacy to begin with, or maybe English isn't their first language, using D-sex language can be very confusing. And so I saw that as a gap. I also just saw the gap that there was nothing speaking to young men about their male bodies. And this is a really important and often overlooked piece of the puzzle when it comes to meeting infertility upstream. So when I started the Body Literacy Project, it was with an eye towards creating model legislation that would use sexed language and that was inclusive of standards for young men. So I had some great partners over the summer that also work on the national level to help develop those standards out. And then have a grant through Duquesne University, actually, to finalize the curriculum that will come forward through the Body Literacy Project. So it's currently in its final stages. We are looking to find schools that are willing to start piloting, be part of a pilot program. And it's meant to be an open and go curriculum. Again, we want to increase access and remove barriers. So I'm not requiring any kind of certification, just ensuring that the final product is very solid and can speak for itself. So we're training med students who are at Duquesne University's School of Osteopathic Medicine, and they will be going into public schools and piloting the Body Literacy Project curriculum this spring.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so exciting. That's really, really exciting. I didn't know that about the standards. Kudos to who wrote those. That's really encouraging. Really encouraging. Wow.
She is a really feisty second year law student at CUA.
Gosh, that's so cool. Wow.
Yes, she'd be a great podcast guest. I'll line you up.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to talk to her. That's so cool. Emily, any questions, or Katie, anything else you'd like to share with listeners about resources and other great things you're doing? My goodness.
I don't know. I think right now I'm just like hunkering down and getting ready to have my baby.
Right. Hunkering down after launching a website and a new project.
I bet you're ready to take some time with that new baby and just
I'm excited.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Yes. We're going to put everything in a dormant fallow season, and it will all be there when I come back.
It will be. Yes. Harvest is plentiful, so it won't be going anywhere. That's for sure. Yeah, this is just so great, Katie. Just really encouraging. I love sharing more resources with people, and I do enjoy conversations around things, framing our conversation, I guess, a little bit more, using terminology carefully and being aware of that. And so using things like, body literacy, so that you have this right to know about your body and to be properly informed so that you can make different decisions. And we really, we like to talk a lot on this podcast about having that be formed in the context of the family and the parents to be well educated and to be informed. So I hope for parents that are listening, they just feel more empowered with another one of our episodes, with more resources about how you can broach this topic with your young person, and then just kind of start the trickle effect within a community as you educate one person about their body. And then, as we've had guests on this show share, then that teen is in school and they hear their other teen friend say something, and the teen can pop in and say, well, your period's not supposed to be like that. And then they wonder, and then they get some information, and it just kind of can spread like a slow wildfire, but usually does spread that way too. So yeah, you're just doing some great stuff, Katie. This is so impressive and exciting. So I'm really grateful for your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the encouragement. I'm grateful for both of you as well.
Yeah. So we will put lots of that information in the show notes for anyone that's interested. So go follow Katie. Are you on social media too, Katie?
I am not.
Okay, so people have to People have to do the old-fashioned way and just go to the websites.
They have to go to my website. You can
Right.
email me. It's katie@katievidmar.com if you'd like to get in touch with me directly.
Okay, I'll put your email on the show notes too. So,
Thank you.
all right. Yeah. Thank you again, Katie, so much for your time, your wealth of knowledge, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good night, ladies.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.